Play something for us, Mrs. Barrett smirked, expecting to humiliate the quiet black student. The old piano waited in the corner, collecting dust. Marcus Thompson's fingers touched the keys, and what happened next left the entire class breathless. Sometimes talent speaks louder than prejudice. Drop a musical keyboard if you believe in the power of proving others wrong. Marcus Thompson sat quietly in the back row of Mrs. Barrett's classroom at Riverside Academy. His fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk, a habit that helped him focus. The prestigious Boston private school buzzed with morning energy, but Marcus kept to himself. Mrs. Barrett, a 45-year-old veteran teacher with perfectly styled brown hair and a pressed navy suit, scanned the room with calculated precision. For months, she had systematically ignored Marcus's raised hand, quickly glossing over his correct answers while lingering on his rare mistakes. "Did you see how she never calls on him?" whispered James, a student sitting nearby. Marcus just shrugged, used to the treatment. But today felt different. Mrs. Barrett kept glancing his way, a slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. The old Steinway piano in the corner seemed to loom larger than usual. The morning dragged on until music appreciation class. Mrs. Barrett stood at the front, discussing classical composers with her usual air of superiority. Her eyes landed on Marcus. "I heard your grandfather was a musician?" Her voice carried a hint of mockery. The classroom fell silent. Marcus straightened in his chair. "Yes, ma'am. He played jazz and classical piano." "How interesting." Mrs. Barrett's lips curled into a calculated smile. "Perhaps you'd like to demonstrate for us tomorrow? Show us what you've learned." Whispers erupted around the room. Some students snickered, expecting entertainment at Marcus's expense. James shot him a concerned look. "Unless, of course, you're not up to it," Mrs. Barrett added, her voice dripping with false concern. Marcus met her gaze steadily. His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. "Music isn't just notes, boy. It's your voice when the world won't listen." "I'll play tomorrow," he said quietly. "Wonderful." Mrs. Barrett clapped her hands together. "We'll all look forward to your performance." The next day, tension filled the classroom. Marcus walked the old Steinway, its surface reflecting the morning light. Mrs. Barrett leaned against her desk, arms crossed, wearing a satisfied smirk. "Any time now, Mr. Thompson," she said, checking her watch. "We don't have all day." Marcus sat down, adjusting the bench. His fingers hovered over the keys. The room held its breath. Then he began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne filled the air, but with a subtle twist. Marcus wove in jazz elements, his grandfather's influence flowing through every measure. The melody soared, his fingers dancing across the keys with practiced precision. Mrs. Barrett's smirk faltered. Students who had been slouching sat up straight, phones forgotten in their hands. James's mouth hung open in disbelief. The music built, layer upon layer, classical structure meeting improvised jazz runs. Marcus closed his eyes, letting the music speak what words never could. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. "Make them feel it, boy. Make them understand." As the final notes faded, silence hung in the air. Then, from the back of the room, James started clapping. Others joined in, the applause growing into a thunderous ovation. Several students were recording on their phones, some wiping tears from their eyes. Mrs. Barrett stood frozen, her face pale. That's enough," she stammered, but her voice was lost in the celebration. "Mrs. Barrett." Marcus spoke, his voice clear and steady. "You wanted to teach us about music today. I hope I helped." A student called out, "That was amazing, Marcus. Why have you played for us before?" "Because he was never asked," James answered, his eyes fixed on Mrs. Barrett. "Some people see what they want to see, not what's actually there." Mrs. Barrett's lips trembled. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Her carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbled under the weight of undeniable talent. The next day, everything had changed. Students greeted Marcus in the hallways, asking about piano lessons and music recommendations. The school principal, having seen the viral videos of his performance, invited him to play at the upcoming school concert. Mrs. Barrett's demeanor had shifted too. Her smirk was replaced by a quiet humility. When she passed Marcus in the hallway, she couldn't meet his eyes. during music class. She called on him first. Mr. Thompson, would you share your thoughts on jazz influence in modern classical music? Marcus smiled, remembering his grandfather's words. Music breaks down walls, boy, even the ones people build in their hearts. Sometimes the greatest lessons aren't found in textbooks, but in the moments when talent speaks truth to prejudice. Musical keyboard if the story touched your heart. Hit like and share. Thaw balloon comment below. What hidden talent are you afraid to show? Bell subscribe for more inspiring stories that prove talent knows no boundaries.